Well, hi. If you're watching this, you've probably heard of the Soul of Flight and the April Fool's joke prank that we pulled yesterday. Well, it was a carefully constructed ruse with 2 months of planning. Basically, I'm going to make this video because I had a lot of fun making this, and there was a lot of prep work that went into one day of tomfoolery and chicanery, and there have been enough people on Instagram and Reddit who've asked me for more details, whether it be about the world building or how this coordinated joke came together. For your viewing pleasure, this video is going to be separated into 4 chapters that you can skip to depending on why you're here. The first chapter is going to be, what's the joke? The second part is going to be, what were my goals with the joke? Part 3 is going to be how I pulled all this together and all of the work that went into the Soul of Flight existing. The 4th chapter is going to be about the world building of Nibiru and the Soul of Flight, and also where you can read the world building document. With that setup out of the way, let's get into it. So, what was the joke, right? So on Reddit especially, like a lot of the people who didn't like this April Fool's prank came from Reddit, which might just be Reddit being Reddit. But let me pull it up. Wow, I can't find the post. That's embarrassing. It looks like it's gone. Wow. So the comment I'm looking for on Reddit seems to be gone. Basically, they were mad because they thought the prank seemed just like it was trying to cause panic. And like, why do people think it's funny to cause panic? When I think they're missing the fact that it's a book. So what was the joke? With a project as complex as the Soul of Flight was to put together, there's multiple layers of jokes that certain people will get out of it, right? So for the people that are hyper-focused and really into Cosmere news, the fact that they might have missed one, which with how much content we've gotten from Brandon and Dragonsteel in the past year or two, is reasonable. What have we got? We've got the Words of Radiance leatherbound. We had the Bands of Mourning leatherbound, yeah? We had Isles of the Emberdark. We had the Backer Kit. We had Stormlight RPG and Cosmere RPG. We had Wind and Truth. There's just a lot. Dragonsteel, they're fantastic. And one of the best things about being in this fandom is that there's just a lot of new stuff happening and a lot of movement. It's a growing fandom. So, little bit of trickery, like, wait, what is this? Maybe have people waste 5 to 10 minutes of their day looking it up just to realize it's April 1st. In the grand scheme of things, that aspect of the prank is pretty harmless. Another aspect is people who get it. The people who see this and like, oh, that's a new Sanderson, but it's April Fool's. And so they start yes-anding, and they are able to pick up pieces of the lore from the other people who are doing reviews. And I think that was my favorite aspect of this. There was almost an ARG element when designing this, because I wanted everyone involved to be working off the same world building, plot, and lore document with the same characters and similar talking points. I even included some meta notes about the book's release, the circumstances surrounding it, and the audience's reception, the public's reception. Like the whole Michael Kramer thing sounding a bit off and people aren't exactly sure why. That was in the world building document, and the content creators who helped me with this took that and ran with it. And it turns out that it was because Boric, who I mentioned was a fan favorite character in the world building document, is a cat. It's like, oh, maybe that's why people thought it was weird. So I also wanted there to be room to grow. I wanted people to be able to piece together what this story is from the reviews, as if someone new to the fandom were watching reviews for a book they'd never heard of, which, you know, not everyone's going to do that because spoilers, but there certainly are people out there who will just watch reviews for books and pick up on the story that way. So with the coordinated lore document and similar talking points, people were able to piece together the story, become in the know, and especially after they reached out to creators like Edge Dancing Through Life, I think was one of the best participants here, because she would bring people in. If someone were to ask her, like, what is this? What's going on? Like, direct message, she would tell them and be like, play along. And they would, because people like being in the joke. So part of it was yes-anding, coordinated lore, and a story that I actually wrote out a plot for this book, and I'll get to that in the world building section. So the joke was, you might have missed a book, spend 5 to 10 minutes looking for it just to realize this is a Terraria thing, which I didn't know about till yesterday, or it's April Fool's Day, which is what it was. Or you can be in on the joke and help us build out this new Cosmere world. And I think one of the reasons why people wanted to participate so much is because if I, to toot my own horn here, I think there are elements of this book that are legitimately cool. That there are things that I could totally see in the Cosmere, and especially the Guild, the Grand Apparatus, and the Shard of Invention. But I'll get to that more in the world building section of this video. So that's what the joke was. Cause a little bit of confusion, have people Google search for 5 to 10 minutes, and then join in on the joke. Yes, and just have a good time. I pride myself on researching my videos really well and being a reliable source of information. So having one day a year where I can use my powers of storytelling for evil is fun. I enjoy chicanery and tomfoolery every now and again. And so April Fools, I try to do something every year. If we look back at my channel last year, I came up with fake Stormlight Archive theories that kind of play off of common tropes, which didn't age well because a lot of the theories that I said as jokes actually happen in Wind and Truth. And then before that, I made up an entire fake history of tissues, including citations, fake historical figures, and so on. So what was my goal for this? I wanted this book to be real for one day. I wanted enough content creators to all be broadcasting it the same way, playing it straight. So just for April 1st, we lived in a reality where The Soul of Flight was a real book. Does that involve a little bit of deception? Maybe, but just as much as other storytelling does. It's more of performance art than anything else. Everyone was on the same page with what was in the book, how we were talking about it, but everyone was able, they had freedom to add their own out of left field, out of pocket things to the story. So that was my goal going into the creation of this project. Make enough marketing materials, make the book cover and the story believable enough that if I had enough people talking about it, we could all pretend and live in a reality for a day where the Soul of Flight was real. So how did this happen? Well, I brainstorm video topic ideas months in advance. Sometimes I come up with multiple potential topics per month and then pick one as it gets closer. So I was thinking about April Fool's videos back in like early January. And the one that I ended up on was I wanted to make a review for a fake Sanderson book for my audience. Kind of the same way that I did with the history of tissues, where I would be presenting on a topic as if it were completely real with the twist at the end that it's April Fool's. But also, if you've watched this channel in the last year, you'll know I'm nothing if not ambitious and willing to commit to over-the-top bits and execute them. So I figured, if I can set all this up, why just keep it on my channel? If I could get other people to contribute, that would just sell the joke even more. Because instead of just watching my video and getting to the end and being like, oh, April Fools, they're going to have to jump between different channels. They don't have to, but if they watch, say, Raffo or Cosmere Horizons or Cosmere Mo on Instagram, and everyone's talking about this book, that will add to the credibility of a fake book review more than if it were just one person screaming into the void. So I wrote the world building and background for The Soul of Flight in late January and pitched the idea early February to the Cosmere content creators in a Discord server I'm in. I actually sent the message on the 10th of February with kind of just a overview, what I've already done, because I wrote the outline and the plot of the book before approaching everyone. I also came up with some cover mock-ups before I commissioned an artist. So there's something already there for these people to latch onto, that they're not getting in on the ground floor of a project. I've already done a bunch of the legwork and creative work, and they can hop on and add to it. So this has been in the works with everyone since early February, and I commissioned a childhood friend of mine, Cade Young. He's an art student in Chicago. Cade is a very talented artist, and I sent him some mock-ups, some reference images of other Brandon Sanderson covers, and kind of a blocking layout for what I wanted the cover to be. I initially tried to design it myself in Unreal Engine because I am a horrible 2D artist, but I am okay at manipulating 3D assets. But it became apparent to me that I did not have the artistic chops in this wheelhouse to make a cover as great as this. So shout out to Cade. You did an incredible job, dude, and you got people. Some people people believe that this was real, and even if they didn't, I have people in my DMs asking where they can get this. Not like the book, but the cover. So once I got the final version of the cover from Cade, I designed it in Photoshop. Now, usually for a print project like this, you'd use something like Illustrator or InDesign, but I'm just more comfortable in Photoshop. I had also already done a layout of it, so it was really just drag and drop Cade's art on the cover. Let me take this off real quick. Oh, by the way, fun little aside. I designed the cover to fit on Warbreaker. So in most people's videos you've seen who have a physical copy, it's on Warbreaker. It also fits on Skyward Flight, which Soul of Flight, Skyward Flight, that's kind of funny. So this is the cover. I have Cade's art here, the spine with the Tor logo, some reviews on the back, and then Brandon Sanderson's about, and then a blurb for the book. The blurb from the book is pretty fun, actually. I won't read it all here, I'll just read the final tagline. The guild is coming, and they're not just interested in flight, they want everything. But it's a real blurb about the contents and the story of the Soul of Flight and the characters therein. So if you are here to get your hands on the cover, you can look at that you can look at the document there. I also snuck in a couple Easter eggs. I changed the series that Sanderson completed for another author from Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time to George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. I also added a review on the back from someone named U/Jokester Spring Holiday. April Fools. Shout out again to Cade. You did such a good job, and this project would not have gone as far as it did without having an actual artist on board designing that. I also was able to put that cover image on a 3D graphic of a book. So a lot of like the 3D mock-up you see people using, I made that. I made a fake screenshot of a Sanderson live stream. I messed with the HTML on the Dragonsteel Books website to add the Soul of Flight as a banner image, as well as in the progress bar. Oh, large visual inspiration for this cover was the Bands of Mourning and the Lost Metal. Mostly because we have this fun little gear pattern at the top, and if you look at the hardcovers for Mistborn, they have that line pattern. I also modeled the gradient and kind of just the overall formatting on the Mistborn hardcovers. An additional shout out to Ghost Buddies, Edge Dancing Through Life, Cosmere Mo, and the Cosmere Academy. They all made memes for the release, and I think that added a lot as well, because that way you're not just getting review content, you're getting regularly scheduled programming, albeit propaganda for a fake book that doesn't exist. And some of those are really funny. Like, yeah, even with I think you have to have the context of the story a little bit for them to be really funny. But the Snow Leopards, Velyomen's toaster invention, I had a great time looking at those. I even made a couple, and so those were included. Also, shout out to Ammon of ADHD Projects. He made a Screen Rant article that you can actually scroll through. I don't know if anyone used it. I think I used a screenshot of it, but it looks legit, and that was really well done. And I guess while I'm thanking people, let me name off all of my co-conspirators. We had Cosmere Mo, CJ of Cosmere Quandaries, the Cosmere Conversation Podcast, Katie of Art BZD, Ammon of ADHD Projects, Cosmere Horizons from YouTube, Cosmere Junkie, he boosted a lot of our posts, Edge Dancing Through Life, got on the train bright and early, and her Instagram video just popped off. That was so good. Ghost Buddies, Lord Loop. Is that really your name, Lord Loop? I've been thinking it was Lord Loopy this whole time. Okay. Steve the Cosmere Knot, The Sandbox, the Cosmere Academy, and I think that is it I have in here. I do know a couple other people jumped on the trend a little later on, but major shout out to all you guys. This would not have been possible or got as much reach without you. You all contributed so much, and it was just such a great time. So thank you for that. As I mentioned a little earlier, it was important to me that in this project there was room to experiment and grow. I wanted to provide an outline of what the book was and the characters in it and what happens in the book, so we can all have similar talking points, but I also really wanted them to just throw in their own things. And Meowdy and a bunch of the other purrs that developed throughout the day were because of other people adding their lore. I hadn't planned for there to be a Hoyd cameo in this book, but apparently somebody added one along the way, as well as Chris and Naj being in there. So, unexpected, but it works. That's what I wanted. I wanted people to add a little spice to their tellings of the Soul of Flight. So the world building for this book, it takes up 5 pages of my Google Doc here. It's separated into a top section, which is about the book, so some background for the world that it's in, and then a characters section, and then the plot, which I have separated into 3 acts, Act 1, 2, and 3, and then at the very end, there's magic system, other cool things, and then meta notes. So when I was designing this, I wanted it to feel Cosmere, but also if I'm able to separate the corner of the Cosmere that this is in from what we know, it adds a little more wiggle room for believability. I also think these kind of things are best when they're based off of an agreed upon truth. So invention is a shard that we know of. Whimsy, valor, and virtuosity, and mercy's in this neighborhood too, are all in this neighborhood. Throwing things in like the Grand Apparatus, or Seslo, for example, from other books, adds a little bit of credulity because those nuggets are real. Those are things from actual Sanderson books. Some other inspirations for the story before I go more into the background of the world building is I speak Portuguese, used to be fluent, now I would rate myself intermediate to low. So I wanted to build some names and places off of Portuguese words and kind of Romance languages. Like the capital city of Geronovia, I based off of the monastery of Jerónimos in Lisbon. Veliomen, the grumpy old man inventor. His name is based off of the words of old and man in Portuguese. Velho and omen. Veliomen. Velo for short. Velho, which is another Portuguese word that just means old, and you can call, like, it's not a respectful term, but you can call an old person just old. Like, that's an old. Ele velho. He's an old. So I thought that was kind of funny. No one picked up on that as far as I'm aware. Aside from that, I wanted to add some clearly Italian sounding words. So Seragoni, Barnino, all sorts of just little things. Because a lot of Sanderson's naming conventions are based off of real world naming schemes that we see. Not necessarily from such well-known Western cultures, because people are more familiar with those, but nonetheless, having a cultural context to build off of made coming up with names that are all cohesive a lot easier. Where I had to deviate from this was with the Kravuken, the snow leopards, which is an idea I got from Cry of the Ice Mark, which I did mention in my review. It's a book I plan to reread soon, because I remember next to nothing of it, but it's one I really liked when I was young. And it has giant snow leopards. I don't remember if they talk, but I think they do. So I had my cultural influences I was pulling from the Portuguese, Italian, some Scandinavian references for how the society is physically built, as well as Iceland in terms of scenery. From there, I needed to come up with the conflict for the book. So a lot of Sanderson stuff there's a macro plot and a micro plot, at least how I see it. So the micro plot, I would say, is the day-to-day of these characters, their interpersonal relationships. There can be good guys, bad guys, people learning, all in kind of like a smaller human scale, and then it gets blown up to the Shardic and God scale. So I had built a little bit of that in there. The interpersonal conflict with the people in Velo's group, in his staff, as they rapidly tried to develop powered flight in a world of Renaissance Europe architecture and technology. And then the planet-sized looming ticking clock of the guild showing up. So that was kind of the big backdrop, the inciting incident, and setting up for the conflicts. And from there, I developed what would happen. But it was also critical to have the background information done before I started to write the plot. Like, what's going on in this corner of the Cosmere? Who is in this ship, and why are they demanding that someone invent powered flight or be assimilated? Even though they did both and got assimilated. And I think clearly, Steve also picked up on this, some of the inspiration for the Guild and the fact that they are conquering cultures and bringing them into their giant planet-sized ship is the Borg from Star Trek, and I don't think that is out of place in the Cosmere. Sanderson is or was a Trekkie, and I know that the Kandra, at least in some part, are inspired by the changelings from like Deep Space Nine. Like, you can find Star Trek elements in the Cosmere, and whether or not Star Trek invented them first, I am pretty sure that's the path they took to get in here. Star Trek, Sanderson, into the Cosmere. So pulling from Trek, while it does help me with having a villain that's already somewhat established and well-known and imposing, it also helps because Sanderson kind of has done that in the past too. I also threw in the aliens from Independence Day as some inspiration, because they're here to collect the resources of the planet, as well as the people. I think the biggest brain part I came up with for the Guild was the vessel. I thought that was so cool, and I still do. The idea that the societies that invention shaped were able to advance so far that they invented something to capture their god and make him power their ship against his will, basically, is really cool. And that ties into Wind and Truth of how Honor's not able to contact Invention. So timeline for Invention in Soul of Flight is Shattering, invents a bunch of cool things in the Cosmere, gets captured by one of the societies that he helped to bolster up. They build the grand apparatus around him, which is another kind of community reference. It's from a WOB, a pretty well-known WOB, from Dragonsteel 2023, I believe. So they build the grand apparatus to capture the shard, have him power their vessel, and they just call it the vessel. Which I think is cool, because it does play off of not only Cosmere lore that's established, but it plays off of it in a fun and clever way. So I'm really proud of that. I named the planet Nibiru, again pulling from Portuguese. Neve is snow, and if it's a snow planet, I'm like, oh, Nibiru, Snowio. Yeah, that's what we're doing. Velo being the Da Vinci of his time is something I've written in here because, well, it makes sense that the inventor, the well-known inventor, would get recruited to try to stop the alien invasion after they require them to invent powered flight. I also really liked the imagery of, oh gosh, what's it called? Is it an ornithopter? Ornithopter. Yeah, the Ornithopter by Da Vinci. That was a reference image I sent to Cade, and you can definitely see that influence on his little glider here. It didn't cross my mind that people might think that's a kite until this morning, actually, when I was reading comments where people thought it was part of like the kite magic system. I should have leaned into that more, but that did not cross my mind when world building this. I did have a joke in here that his most popular invention is basically a toaster, and a lot of the content creators ran with that, and I think that's great. I've got more characters in here, the team, Satiro, Saragoni, Barnino, King Heoneth. I did not mention Ceslo anywhere in here. This came to me after the fact, when I was actually recording my review for it. I'm like, oh, Ceslo sounds vaguely similar to the naming conventions. I could throw that in. I have a little bit of background for each of these characters, some personalities, what they do in the story. So the Snow Leopards, aside from being inspired by Cry of the Ice Mark by Stuart Hill, they came to be a part of the story when I thought, what kind of magical creature do I want here? I figured that, having a snow world where they don't use the wheel, they use sleds and skis to get around, they should have a pet or a different kind of domesticated creature. And I thought snow leopards were cool visually, as well as the reference to the Cry of the Ice Mark. But also, Sanderson has increasingly added kind of more intelligent magical creatures, right? So the Rashadium, for example, intelligent horses. The Khandra can take up an animal body and basically become a familiar. So I figured that would fit in just fine. But also, I had to think of how they would be different from the human societies of Nibiru. I also had to come up with a different naming system for these giant cats. I figured I wanted it to kind of be like a big cat roaring that had to have a lot of bite to the sounds. So the name of the society is the Kravuken, and I was pulling from kind of just generic monster alien sounding name plus hard consonants. Kravuken, Borik. Those are really the only two names I came up with. I'm not going to go over the plot too much here. I'm going to share this document in the description, so if you wanted to read over my April Fool's 2025 world building document, you can. It'll be in the description. And also, you pretty much get the entire plot from my review, as well as Cosmere Horizons and Rapho. So I won't extend the runtime of this video any longer than I have to. Magic system, Eurysite. This one was probably the hardest part, and I think it shows. Eurysite as a concept is pretty basic. It is a magic stone, and how can I make that Cosmere? Well, I figured having it be radioactive, but magic could be cool. We haven't really seen anything like that in the Cosmere so far as I'm aware, where there's just a stone that lets off low levels of like a spiritual radiation. I think that's how Steve said it in his video, and it was very articulate. Because of how things in the Cosmere filter realmatically from like spiritual, cognitive, physical, it letting off a spiritual radiation messes with their spirit web, but also with their cognitive aspect. So if you're around it long enough, you can be irradiated to have kind of an increased, little bit of an increased cognitive aspect. My light just went out. Well, I'm almost done, so I'm just going to keep going. I wanted to add more Cosmere flair to Eurysite with carving it with runes. That's something we've seen from Cell, so we do know that shapes with intent and meaning bestowed upon them by people do have power over investiture in the Cosmere. So I figured that would be a fun way to make it versatile enough while also keeping some semblance of rigidity. I did not flesh this out as much as I should have. I didn't come up with like hardly any shapes or runes for this at all. I just said what it can do if etched with the right runes and hand waved it away. I also threw in the fact that metal interacts with it because that's that's a Cosmere standard at this point. So if I were to go back to this project, if I were to ever actually like write the story of the Soul of Flight, which I feel kind of weird about because it's basically just Cosmere fan fiction divorced from the Cosmere, I would have to flesh out Eurysite a lot more. And finally, meta notes. What did I tell people about the surrounding information of the book? Part of the Leatherbound campaign, plausible because it could have gotten buried in all the announcements. It's not a secret project. It's a standalone Cosmere novel. Michael Kramer sounds weird. This was more to just give people something interesting to talk about and latch onto, because, I don't know, if he sounded really weird in an audiobook, people would talk about it, because he's great. I also wanted people to hate the ending. Not because of Sanderson book discourse recently, but mostly because I wanted that to be the tell. I wanted people to hear what the ending was and be like, there's no shot. There's no shot Sanderson would end the book with body horror being forced to watch and help assimilate and spike the rest of the civilization. No way. So I wanted that to be kind of unrealistic, but also give people something to talk about. I mentioned that people like Boric, and sure enough, people do like Boric. I don't know how much of it is them saying they do versus how much they actually have latched onto this fun snow leopard scientist house cat lady, but I like that. I like Boric. But anyway, that is a autopsy of the April Fool's prank. If I gotcha, April Fools, see you next year. If you enjoyed this video and enjoyed hearing how this crazy project came together, be sure to like and subscribe. I don't really do anything halfway around here, and I think it tells. So if you enjoy high effort, high quality content, like and subscribe, and tell me what you thought of the Soul of Flight April Fool's Day shenanigans in the comment section down below. All right, catch you later. Bye.